Have a big honking insurance company, $33 billion in annual revenue. Is that about right?
Correct, yeah.
Um, Sensitive to the economic cycle, like any other company.
Sure.
What's your take on 2019? How are things looking for you?
Yeah. So again, thank you for having me. MassMutual is an interesting company. We're a mutual company, which means we're owned by our policyholders,
Right.
which lets us think about a long-term business in a long-term way. But we're looking at what's happening with, I guess, a little bit of concern, but nowhere near as much concern, perhaps, as the equity market showed us at the end of the year. We think the Fed normalizing is actually a healthy sign. The U.S. economy seems to be in very, very, very good shape. Concern about what's going on politically, both in the U.S. with the shutdown, of course, Brexit, of course, China trade. There's plenty of things to be worried about. But we think fundamentally U.S. companies, U.S. consumers are in a pretty good spot, and we expect 2019 to be kind of okay is the way we would describe it.
I want to drill down a little bit on that point you made about being a mutual company. There used to be a lot of them, there are fewer of them.
Correct.
What are the differences and perhaps advantages of being a mutually owned business versus, say, a public company or privately held?
Yeah, so in our business, again, no normal person thinks about life insurance, so let's just kind of start with that. But it's a very long-term business. Our oldest policyholder is 108. She bought her policy 91 years ago. And as you age, switching costs for permanent insurance grow because whether you like it or not, your mortality gets worse, right? So we have a lot of policyholders who've been with us a long time. Since it's such a long-term business, that long-term focus on the policyholder, where sometimes public companies get focused on the short-term, we think is a big advantage. So that's allowed us to grow. We've gone from being the 13th biggest seller of life insurance in the U.S. in 2005 to the second biggest in 2017 for the last full year. So we've just slowly, consistently grown. Back 1851, there were 31 people who started the company in Springfield. Now we have almost 5 million members of the company in the United States. So it's a pretty neat way to organize yourself for a very long-term business.
What is your take, Roger, on how President Trump has handled the economy?
If you just look at it from an economist's perspective, the deregulatory push, which I think is not discussed enough, frankly. I mean, this is as big as...
Has that affected your business?
A little bit. It was really more of a court order around something called the DOL fiduciary rule. But again, big picture, we have not had this focus on taking regulations out really since Reagan. And it kind of gets lost a little bit in the shuffle. Clearly, the tax cuts were a major fiscal stimulus for the economy and for companies as well. The volatility of governance by tweet has its challenges, but I don't think we're any different than anyone else in having to live in that environment.
I think a lot of Americans, Roger, are frustrated by government in Washington, and not just Republicans, but Democrats too, of course. And the shutdown is, example A, right?
Yeah,
Exhibit
absolutely.
A.
Right.
As a CEO, do you feel like you have any responsibility to help end the shutdown, and have you? What's your take on that?
It's funny. I was having dinner with a Canadian last night. I said, "Can you just get it together?" Because clearly the economic impact of the shutdown is beginning to be real. I mean, the 800,000 Americans not getting paid know they're going to get paid. The federal contractors that aren't getting paid, kind of may not. So I actually think CEOs do have an obligation to try to get the sides together. We'll see what happens in the votes this afternoon in the Senate, and maybe it'll create an opportunity. But I think big business really does have an obligation to try to make things better overall, and that includes trying to get both sides to talk together.
And I think you have sort of a closer interest in a very specific way being on the Smithsonian National Board.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
we're losing $1 million a day in revenue. And more importantly, people can't see our amazing museums. It is one of the coolest things in the world that all those museums are free for anybody. The most visited group of museums actually in the world. Yeah, let's get the museums open, and let's let the kids and groups get through and see all the cool stuff we have in Washington.
So you're losing money. The Smithsonian is losing money because they're not open. The museums are not open
because people come in and they shop in the stores. They buy model airplanes at the Air and Space Museum. And again, you don't think about it, but that's all part of how we fund the Smithsonian. Since we're not having any revenue from charging people to come in, those revenues from our other activities are part of it. So just was in the press the other day that's what it's costing us. But more importantly, people plan to come to Washington 6 months in advance. In fact, I was just talking to a Boy Scout group who was going to be in Washington, and they're like, "Are we going to be able to go to the museum?" And I said, "I'd love to help you get a behind-the-scenes tour, but I can't because the museum's closed." So,
has the board met about the Smithsonian board?
In fact, there's a Smithsonian board meeting coming up in next week, and we won't be meeting in the Smithsonian. We'll be meeting in a hotel.
Right.
So we continue to take our obligations seriously, and we hope when we get there next week, the museums are open.
Let me ask you a little bit about tax breaks for companies. My understanding is you got a $46 million tax break in Springfield in Boston.
Yep.
Amazon got a $3 billion tax break.
Yeah.
You're probably like, how did they get more than we did?
They clearly negotiated
right,
harder.
yeah, exactly, a lot harder.
Yeah.
Is there a limit, though, Roger, to how much taxpayers should be looking to carry the burden for companies? I mean, I know obviously that there's a payback, but how is that calculated? What is your thought process on that?
So, MassMutual is consolidating 13 offices around the United States down to 4. And as part of that, we're moving 2,000 jobs to Massachusetts, and we're moving 1,500 jobs to Springfield. Which is frankly not booming like Boston is.
Yeah.
So we were thrilled to be able to bring so many more jobs to our main headquarters in Springfield. The way the world works is states offer incentives to various companies. And part of my job as a fiduciary, frankly, for our policyholders is to make sure that we do the best thing for them. So I think in the case of what Massachusetts has done, it's a heck of a good investment for a company that's been around 100 and soon to be 68 years to put 2,000 more jobs in Massachusetts. I would have liked to have gotten $3 billion, but I also didn't run a multi-city auction over an extended period of time. So kudos to the Amazon guys, but we're very thrilled to be bringing 2,000 jobs to Massachusetts and most importantly, 1,500 new jobs to Springfield.
Some would say that auction was a little much, a little over the top, but you
markets are markets.
To each its own, right? Let me just last question, Roger. Let me ask you about Springfield and attracting talented employees there, and also what it's like to try to hire talented people in this job, this tight job market.
Yeah, look, the job market is tight, and again, Springfield's been a great place for us. But one of the reasons we wanted to open an office in Boston first, it's only 90 minutes away, so it's not as if it's all that difficult. But Boston attracts people from all around the world, and when people get to Springfield, they love it. We do a great job retaining people. But unless you've been to school in New England, you may not, frankly, know where Springfield is.
Right.
So, as we were talking, you know where Springfield is, and that's great. So we've got great people in Springfield. We're thrilled to have more people there, but we love having an opportunity to recruit into Boston as well.